Last week, you got to hear from all of the staff about what prairie means to them. This week, we get to talk with some of the visitors to the site to see what prairie means to them. And so, Bill Davit, the gentleman who created the prairies here at the Litzinger Road Ecology Center 31 years ago, is who we get to hear from first, and that's a pretty special treat. He also created, before coming here 31 years ago, he created some of the prairie reconstructions out at Shaw Nature Reserve as well. So it's a really cool treat to get to hear from his perspective about what prairie means to him. And then we'll get to hear from some of the volunteers here that came and visited this week. So let's go hear what they have to say. I am here with the Bill Davit, who started the prairies here at the Litzinger Road Ecology Center now 31 years ago. Bill, when you hear the word prairie, what does that mean to you?
I guess I would be thinking about the first prairies we planted at the Shaw Nature Reserve in 1980. And before that, I didn't even know what a prairie was. And working with the prairie plants, starting with collecting seeds of the wildflowers and growing them in the greenhouse and planting them in the prairie, and to see the whole picture of the prairie that way. It was just a wonderful experience. When you actually work with something like that, instead of just reading about it, it just means a whole lot more to you. So later on, when I got to know prairie more, people started asking me to plant a prairie farm. And I planted 2 on Clayton Road and a 32-acre prairie up by Winfield. And it was really a good experience because each site is so different with different problems. The worst problem we ever encountered was the prairie up at Winfield. The seed we purchased must have had a little bit of Sericea lespedeza in it. And that got spread before I even knew what was happening. So that's the only real downside we ever had with prairie work. Of course, later on, my daughter became the executive director of the Missouri Prairie Foundation. That's Carol Davit. And going to the Prairie Foundation's outings and getting involved with Missouri prairies that way, that was another whole chapter in learning about prairie. Well,
how valuable do you think those remnant prairies those few remnant prairies that are left in Missouri, how valuable do you think those are?
They're very valuable because a lot of them have plants that you would never be able to find elsewhere. And it's important to preserve the heritage of the prairie that way. And it gives more people an opportunity to visit these prairies and learn more about it, especially the original prairies. It's always different than the planted prairie.
Well, Bill, it looks like you actually have a guest on your shoulder.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there she goes.
Oh.
She's looks like she's thanking you for giving her a home.
What is it?
Eastern Carpenter Bay.
Oh.
So, when you hear the word prairie, what does it make you think of?
My first experience in the prairie, my first field job was working with lesser prairie chickens and monitoring them. And my first impression was the sky. Oh my gosh, there was so much sky. And it was like a feast for the senses. Stars at night, sunrises, sunsets, just the beauty, the colors. The scents on the prairie, the smells of the flowers, and the birds, goldfinches, lesser prairie chickens, so many different types of birds.
Hi, I'm Sarah Wilson, and when I hear the word prairie, I think of wonder and curiosity, diversity. This is like a picnic for all the senses to come here. So it's a treat, and I love it here.
When I hear the word prairie, what does it make me think of? Well, of course I think about summer, and I think about the tall plants and the different colors of flowers and the pollinators and the birds and just the diverse populations throughout the prairie. But my favorite thing about the prairies at the Ecology Center, because they're the only real prairies I've ever been around, and I grew up in Missouri, I think about the wintertime. I love the different colors of browns and the dried up plants that you can shake some of the seed pods and it makes a little rattle sound. I love the different textures that there are in the winter. I love the smells. I like to just go out and stand in a spot and close my eyes and just take a deep breath, and I would bottle that smell if I could. It's my favorite. So that's what I think of when I think of prairies.
Pardon the construction noise in the background, but we got a couple responses back in text about what prairie means to some of our friends, and I thought I would read those to you. From one of our teacher partners, Peggy Knock, she says, "I give up." Apparently, she was probably thinking about what the answer was for a little bit. But she says, "I give up. Prairie means an abundance to me of plants, animals, and learning opportunities." That's a great one. And then from Jerry Lehman, prairies. When I think of prairies, I wonder what Lewis and Clark would have seen in 1803. Lewis reported seeing vast expanses of prairies and bison as far as they could see. I wonder if they were able to capture the beauty of the prairies when they reported back to Thomas Jefferson. Yes, so in their journals that are available online, I couldn't find any really kind of great descriptions, that really go into detail. Maybe they're out there. I just couldn't find it. But I did find, give me a moment here, a great quote from just a few years later, from 1811, from a explorer of the area, Henry Murray Brackenridge. And his description here, which I find quite beautiful, was when he was standing on a bluff in St. Charles, and here's how it goes here. Before me, I could mark the course of the Mississippi, its banks without even a fringe of wood. To the left, we behold the ocean of prairie, with islets at intervals. The whole extent perfectly level, covered with long waving grass, and at every moment changing color from the shadows cast by the passing clouds. In some places there stands a solitary tree, a cottonwood or walnut of enormous size, but from the distance diminished to a shrub. 100,000 acres of the finest land are under the eye at once, and yet in all this space there is but one little cultivated spot to be seen. So at that point in time, most of the prairies hadn't been tilled under yet, or plowed under yet. And I just thought that was a really nice quote to kind of give you an idea of what Thomas Jefferson and Meriwether Lewis might have seen at that point in time.
Hi, I'm Pat. When I think of the prairie, I think of tall plants and lots of bumblebees. the time I saw the deer running through the prairie, and I always hope to see that again.
My name is Chuck Wilson, and when I think of the word prairie, it reminds me of the first time I set foot on this property. I had the good fortune of landing here late July one year. And for me, a prairie was probably a dusty trail that the wagon trains took, where there was an absence of vegetation. And I was just so blown away by the colors, the diversity, and just the incredible quantity of plant life and animal life that was contained in the prairie. A lot of times when I think about the prairie, I think when I come here, I'll look at it from 200 feet away. It'll make me want to get to 100 feet away. And if I'm lucky and have the time, I'll get down on the ground in the prairie and I'll look. And at that point, I experience something that people don't understand about knowledge. And that is that the power of direct observation, learning something by looking at something, is a unique way of learning things, different from anything else.
I'm Diane D. When I hear the word prairie, of course, I think of Little House on the Prairie. When I'm with the children here, I'll say, do you ever go to the grocery store? And they say yes. I say, well, this is a grocery store for all kinds of creatures, and they don't have to pay.
Hi, I'm Allison Asme, and when I think of the word prairie, think of prairies, I think of childhood. I grew up in Kansas, and I remember taking trips over and driving through the Tallgrass National Prairie Preserve. And before I knew anything about prairies, it just made a big impact on me as a child. So that's what I think about.
Hi, I'm Mary Woodward, and I'm a horticulturist and volunteer educator here at LREC. And when I think of prairie, I think of a sanctuary of ever-changing colors throughout the seasons.
Hi, my name's Lynn Good. I'm a volunteer educator. When I think of prairie, I think of a flat area that's a thicket of plants without trees. There are usually about half as tall as me or taller and up to taller, and a lot of insects. And I also have this sense of there's a whole lot going on down in there that I can't see, and I wish I was a little critter so I knew.
Hi, I'm Charlie Wilson, and I'm a volunteer at the Litzinger Road Ecology Center. And when I think of the word prairie, I think of the Litzinger Road Ecology Center. We have 3 of the most beautiful and alive prairies that anyone would ever see, or they are just beautiful and alive. So when I think of prairie, I think of Litzinger.
So Stacy, when you hear the word prairie, what's that make you think of?
So when I hear the word prairie, I think of native plants and the variety of plants that are available to be planted. It's, just looking out across this prairie, I'm just so excited every time I come by it because I enjoy all the variety of plants that are in there. When I first started working at Litzinger, I had no clue that there were so many native plants. I grew up in a farming community where a lot of the land that you saw was full of corn and beans, and there wasn't a lot of native plants per se. And so when I hear the word prairie, I think of a lot of beautiful flowers that insects can enjoy and butterflies can flock to, and that's one of my favorite parts is, you know, seeing the living creatures that enjoy the prairie.
Well, if you made it this far, I know you really enjoy prairies. I don't know about you guys though, but I really enjoyed hearing everybody's different perspectives on what prairie means to them. From perhaps having an early childhood experience with prairies, to having some kind of emotional connection when you are finally in a prairie, to having never been around a prairie and having this misconception of what a prairie was until you moved to St. Louis or somewhere else in the Midwest, and seeing a prairie first for that very first time. Let's say even the ones at Letzinger. I really enjoyed hearing all those experiences. And if you would still like to share your experience, it's not going to become a video, but if you would like to share that experience with me still, I'd more than love to hear it. And no, it'll just stay between the two of us. So you can go ahead and email me that if you'd like. But I thought I would share some extra reading that you can do if you are really wanting to dig deeper into prairie history and prairie ecology. But just want to give you a couple recommendations. So this one, can't highly recommend this one enough. Pre-Settlement Prairie of Missouri by Walter Schroeder. This is, this was released by the Missouri Department of Conservation years ago. It's out of print, but you should be able to find PDFs of it online for free. But this is some of the first, really good accounts of how far spread prairie was in Missouri. And it's this document that we actually know that the tallgrass prairies in the St. Louis area actually did come into the Brentwood area along Deer Creek. And this is put together from early surveys. So that's how we know prairie actually did come into our area. So these are true prairie reconstructions at the Letzinger Road Ecology Center. Alright, so that's a must read in my opinion. If you want to dig a little bit deeper into understanding of Missouri's prairies, this one right here, The Terrestrial Natural Communities of Missouri by Paul Nelson, also out of print, but you should be able to find this online for sale or get it from the library. And I don't know, I never heard of it before very recently, but Susan recommended this one to me. Common Fields and Environmental History of St. Louis. This one was by the Missouri Historical Society Press. Goes into all kinds of information about St. Louis, and it talks about the pre-settlement prairie information from Walter Schroeder in here as well. But it goes into all kinds of environmental history here in St. Louis. And if you want to get into some good history of the area and the prairies, if you're a history buff and you love Lewis and Clark kind of stuff, of course there's the Lewis and Clark journals, which should be available online for free too in PDF forms. I've found them that way. But the prologue to Lewis and Clark, the McKay and Evans expeditions. So this was a few years prior to Lewis and Clark going out, and some interesting information here locally, more specifically locally in Missouri, Schoolcraft's Ozark Journal. So 1818 to 1819. This is Schoolcraft's journey in southern Missouri and Arkansas. Very good book. And if you're wanting to get into prairie reconstruction or restoration work, you gotta read this one, the Tallgrass Restoration Handbook. Basically, for people like Adam and myself, this is the kind of the Prairie Bible. The information in here is really in depth about start to finish in maintaining prairie reconstructions and restorations. Just tons and tons of information. Well, and that's it, guys. Again, I really enjoyed talking with everyone about this and hearing everybody's perspectives, and I hope you guys did too. And I will talk to you soon. See you guys.